Hi there guys, welcome back to the History Teacher. I'm going to look today at the challenges that Elizabeth faced on her religious settlement. So there's two main challenges that she faces. One is from the Puritans, who are a group of radical Protestants, and the other are from the more extreme Catholics, people who did not want to give up their Catholicism. So we're going to have a look at each of the challenges, and then we're going to have a look at how much of a challenge that was. So let's start with the Puritans. So these are radical Protestants. They want to purify the church of anything that is not in the Bible. So they mean that they want to develop their own church, which is not controlled by the Queen. There should be no bishops in their church, no priests, no vestments. They want to ban sinful activities such as gambling, cockfighting, bear fighting. Anything like that is considered sinful in Puritanism, and they want to see it banned. They also want to see a simpler worship. You'll remember in Elizabeth's religious settlement, she wanted to keep the priest's vestments and the decoration in the churches. Well, the Puritans wanted to have extremely plain churches. They wanted to have whitewash on the walls, no crucifixes, because they saw that as too Catholic. Some Puritans believed that the monarch could be overthrown in certain circumstances, especially if they believed that the monarch was too Catholic. They were also, generally speaking, fairly anti-Catholic, and some believed that the Pope was in fact the Antichrist. Others, who were known as millenarians, believed that the world was about to end and that they had to prepare for Jesus' coming. So their challenge to the religious settlement was two main ways. The religious settlement, as you'll remember, placed crucifixes and decoration in the church. Puritans were opposed to this, and many of Elizabeth's bishops threatened to resign. But Elizabeth had no choice but back down on this one because she couldn't replace them. The other big challenge to the religious settlement was over vestments. As you remember, the religious settlement said that priests had to wear special vestments, special clothing that showed that they were priests. Well, in 1566, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was called Thomas Parker, wrote a book of advertisements. And in this book, he advertised an exhibition of vestments which all priests had to attend to come and see what they were supposed to be wearing. A little bit like a sort of 16th century fashion show. 37 priests resigned over this, but that wasn't enough to have enough of an impact, and the law was kept. The other big challenge, of course, was the Catholic challenge. There had been a counter-reformation in Europe, which was the Catholic Church attempt to stop the Protestant Reformation from spreading any further and to sort of bring it back in and get Protestant countries to become Catholic again. In Europe, Protestants had been charged with heresy and burned at the stake. Also, in 1566, the Pope issued instructions to English Catholics that they should not attend church and that he was forgiving them any trouble they got into over that. It's really important that we note that 1/3 of English nobles at this point are recusants. Now, a recusant is just someone who practices Catholicism in secret. They would continue to receive mass at home, and many of them invited priests into their home to perform these ceremonies. If Elizabeth sent in anybody to check up on them to see if they were doing this, they invented a thing called priest holes. And if you go and have a look at any 16th century house today, you will often find a priest hole, which is almost like a hidden cupboard where they would hide the priest and all the Catholic objects like the crucifix and the chalice for taking the mass, and they would have to hide their priest. However, Elizabeth initially put up with all of this. She didn't want to create Catholic martyrs, and she was worried about creating a Catholic rebellion. However, all of this did eventually lead to the revolt of the Northern Lords, and I'll deal with that in a separate video. So how much of a threat were the two groups? Well, Puritans were pretty vocal. They made an awful lot of noise. Many of them were anti-Catholic. People like John Fox produced his Book of Martyrs, which was a list and description of the deaths of all the Protestants who had died under Mary Tudor. However, they were mostly located in the southeast of England, in places like London and Oxford, and most of the north did remain Catholic, and the government was able to ignore most of the Puritan demands, which meant that support was really quite limited because Elizabeth wasn't worried about their reaction. A much, much greater threat, however, was the Catholic. As I've already said to you, 1/3 of the nobility and actually most of the gentry were recusants. They were all worshipping as Catholics in secret, and this was especially in the north. Catholic nobles were from the traditional powerful families that had traditionally reigned, and many of them had become quite rich and powerful under Mary. Families like this included the Nevilles and the Percys. However, they became really angry at their loss of influence at Elizabeth's court, and they did not like Elizabeth's favourites like Dudley and Cecil, who they really saw as Protestant upstarts. The northern nobility as well had traditionally been able to sort of act independently of the crown. They had been able to make their own rules and police their own lands. So they were in a really good position to lead any rebellions. And when the Pope issued his instructions giving them permission to rebel against the Queen in 1566, it really gave them all they needed to act. So that's kind of everything you need to know about the challenges that Elizabeth faced at home. Don't forget all my details. You can follow me on Twitter. You can send me an email in the description below. Don't forget to leave me a comment and like this video. I'd also love it if you could follow me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.